Okay then. Yeah, actually I made you co-host as well, so you can start, please.
Brilliant. Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay. Thank you, Uncle, for asking me to do this again. Happy to be back. Happy to talk to everyone. So, brief introduction from Uncle there, but I'll introduce myself as well. My name's Harshini. I study philosophy, politics, and economics at King's College London. And as Uncle said, I'm going into my third year. And I'm just going to talk you through the process of why PPE, how I got into PPE, and at the end, I'm going to take questions. So if you have any, just jot them down and then we'll go through all of them at the end. I hope that structure is okay. So Harshini, that's my name, King's College London. My background is that I studied economics, maths, and politics at A level. I did a philosophy in AS and I did an EPQ on, I think, political economy, a political economy related subject I did my EPQ in. For those of you who might not be in year 12 or year 13, an EPQ is an extended project qualification. So I think it's 5,000 words long. It's almost like a mini dissertation, and it fares quite well for essay-based subjects. They do look well upon it. I applied for King's College London whilst I was in university, and then I stumbled upon a gap year opportunity that I was very keen on taking, in which I was able to teach at Harrow International School, Hong Kong. And I applied for the job and I got the job. So then I asked King's College London if they could defer my entry for the next academic year, and they were kind enough to do so. So that's why I was able to pursue my gap year. Following my university trajectory, got involved in quite a few societies, PPE Society included, and this summer just gone, I managed to secure a summer internship at Ernst & Young, which is EY, the London office, and I was given a job offer at the end of that, luckily, and the service or the sector line that I'm currently focusing is assurance/audit and also looking into consulting. So we'll go into career paths a bit after, but that's a brief background about myself. So what is PPE? It is the combination of 3 different subjects: politics, philosophy, economics. It is an interdisciplinary course, meaning that it is not really sufficient to only care about 1 or even 2, because there's a lot of universities now that offer philosophy and economics, philosophy and politics. It's about your interest broadly ranging in all of them. So philosophy addresses foundational questions, a lot to do with humanity, a lot to do with logic as well. It really surprises people. It surprised me when I first went into philosophy. There's a lot of mathematics in philosophy. A lot of it is a logical breakdown. And that is quite literally a module that a few of my friends are studying called mathematical logic that is in philosophy. So maths goes really well with philosophy. Politics, I mean, the role of individuals and institutions. We see politics around us every single day, governments, trade unions, etc. And economics, the interplay between consumers, firms, governments, the economy. Once again, quite self-explanatory. There's a bit of maths in that as well. And definitely if you go on to do some particular university degrees, they will require a lot more maths. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So why study PPE? I remember being in the position that you were in, being like, oh, I don't know what to study. There's just such a huge list of things to do. And I think one of the really beneficial things about PPE is it really leaves every door open, except obviously medical degrees and vocational degrees like law. Every other door that could be open that isn't a medical or law degree is pretty much open. You can go into something in the politics field, something into the journalism field, something in the economic field. So finance is very open. And also because it is such a broad degree, even if it doesn't, the job that you go into doesn't directly relate to PPE, any employer will identify that there is a lot of desirable traits and values that you've learned within your degree, because it covers such a broad spectrum that you are highly employable by the end of it. Again, trains you to be a well-rounded individual. Like I said, there's maths in economics and there can be maths in philosophy. And then there's obviously essays in economics and politics. So you're constantly training both sides of your brain, and you do become a really well-rounded individual. There's also group presentations that happen, etc. And so your public speaking gets better. Yeah, it's really like whole well-rounding degree. And it's academically stimulating. I think I really enjoy it. I can choose niches that interest me. Yeah. So these are a few notable PPE graduates. Recognize a few faces. I think Malala's just finished a time at Oxford studying PPE. So a lot of people go into a lot of various things. I think you can have a look at some of the careers that they're doing and get an insight into, okay, this is a possibility for me, but this is not the be all and end all. There are also other careers that you can go into. So this is a quote from the University of Oxford. Every time I get approached about PPE, it's like, what doors do they open? And I don't know how to explain like nearly everything without sounding like there's a catch to it. So this is actually directly quoted from the University of Oxford. Banking, finance, politics, journalism, broadcasting, law, industry, teaching, social work, accountancy, and the list goes on. So if you're in a position where you're 16, 17, 18, and you're thinking, I don't know exactly what job I'm wanting to go into, but you see that it falls into that list, possibly, then it is a very good degree to do because it leaves the door open for those jobs. This is a list of universities that teach PPE when I last checked. So please do your individual research as well, but there's quite a few universities basically. And within this university list, you've got campus unis, you've got city unis, you've got unis that offer different styles of PPE, which I'm going to go into a bit later on. But there's definitely a lot of diversity. It's a well-celebrated course now. It's very much taught across the UK. So there's quite a few to pick from. So these are your Russell Group entry requirements. Russell Groups were a bit more prominent when I was applying to university. I'm not sure how prominent they are nowadays. Nowadays, Russell Group unis, red brick unis, this reputation is kind of falling behind only because people are now just looking at the individual uni, seeing how much value that individual uni can bring them as opposed to the collective institution they belong to. But these are a list of the Russell Group unis back in my day. And the A-level grades that they take in range from A-star AA to ABB. A-star AA, I believe, is some of the London unis. So LSE asks for A-star AA, King's asked for A-star AA. I believe Warwick did as well when I was applying. Oxford actually asked for AAA. And there's a lot of differences between the Russell Group unis, so that's individual research as well. A-level subjects, A-star to B in maths. Some Russell Group unis will ask for maths as a definitive subject that you take for A-level. Now, a lot of PPE subjects, when you research them, will say there is no set subject that you require to take for A-levels, whereas some will say maths. So this is why it's really important, if you haven't chosen your A-levels yet as well, to look into possible unis that you might want to go into and make sure you're not closing the door on them by not taking maths at A-level. If you look into the unis and you see maths is not required, brilliant, you don't have to proceed with that. But that's one really important thing that I would suggest to any GCSE student who might be looking into PPE. IB grades are apparently around 30 to 38. That might have inflated since I last checked, but also I never did IB, so I'm not the most knowledgeable person when it comes to the International Baccalaureate. Again, not necessarily PPE subjects. We'll talk about some advisable subjects to do, but PPE is quite lenient in terms of, as long as in your personal statement you reflect a very honest passion for all three subjects and you can display them in some way within the A-levels that you've taken, you're pretty okay to be able to get onto PPE. So it's a lot of it is to do with your personal statement, if I'm being very honest. And then GCSE subjects, A to C in maths and English. So politics, philosophy, economics is a very notable degree from most unis, but mostly so from Oxford. Oxford has quite the reputation of feeding their PPE candidates straight into Parliament, straight into the Prime Minister role. And so it's quite a prestigious degree to study at Oxford. The entrance requirements, as I say, are AAA, but do not be fooled. It's AAA, but it's a much more stringent process. So for every other university that you apply for PPE, you will only be required to do your UCAS application form. And within your UCAS application form is the personal statement. So that is, I can't remember how many characters it is, but it's about a page and a bit. And that is how much you have to convince the university to take you on. And then obviously your A-level grades. But Oxford works a little bit differently. Oxford will first have an admissions test called the TSA, the Thinking Skills Assessment. And from what I remember, it was a 90-minute multiple choice question and then a 30-minute writing task. And you can revise for this exam. You can get practice papers, etc. But it is ultimately an exam that tests your critical thinking. So it's quite a difficult exam to revise for because there's no content to it. There is no content, there's no syllabus, there's no specification that you can learn. It simply tests how do you think. So these questions are quite, they're quite abstract questions. And your reply to them is simply how you function as a human being. And you can kind of tailor it with all of these practice papers, as I say. But yeah, this admissions test is kind of like a filter to see, this is how we would like our Oxford University students to think. Do you think that way? And if you do think that way, you will then get funneled into the interview process. The interview process, you'll go to Oxford, you'll stay there for like 2-3 days at the college that you've applied for, and you will go through 3 to 4 separate interviews. This changes depending on the degree that you study. I know medical friends that did 1 or 2 interviews, but because you're doing PPE, you have an interview in P, P, and E. And then you can have an extra supplementary one if they want to find out more about you. And so the entrance requirement being AAA comes at the end of all of that. Once they give you the offer, after you've passed the admissions test, passed all 3 to 4 interviews, and then they're happy to give you an AAA. So that's the Oxford application process from what I remember. Please feel free to do your own research, as I say, but Oxford applications, a bit more stringent and a bit of a different ballgame. Oxford interviews, entirely different ballgame. Like, honestly, if you've got help within your sixth form centre, let them know as soon as you can that you're interested in applying to Oxbridge, and they should provide you with interview help because it is a different ballgame, as I say. The UCAS process. In terms of everything else, you're going to go through UCAS, including London unis, Russell Group unis, everything else. You're going to go through the UCAS process. 2019 entry, because that was me, so that's why that screenshot's there. But first of all, I think even before this, make sure you research the uni, go to the uni with your parents, see if you enjoy campus lifestyle, the city lifestyle, etc. And then once you've seen the uni, it's really helpful to look at the university course. So PPE, because it is such a broad degree, different unis have had their different takes on it. So for example, at UCL, PPE is run by the politics department. So in your second or third year, you have the ability to focus in on 2 of your favorite subjects. So if you find I'm really, really faring well with the philosophy and the economics, and I really think I can get a first class degree if I really focus in on this, and this is where I see myself in the future, then you can hone in on them. However, because in UCL it's run by the politics department, they don't allow you to take a step back from the politics subject. So if that's something that in your head you're thinking, okay, I really enjoy PPE, but politics is my least favorite one, maybe the UCL course isn't tailored to you very much. King's has an equal weighting in all 3. So if you really enjoy all 3 of them, you can continue with all 3 of them for all 3 years. However, if you find, you know what, economics or politics or philosophy really isn't for me, I'm really glad I gave it a go in the first year, then they allow you to switch up the weighting in accordance with how you want to do it, which is what I really enjoyed. LSE has PPE, and LSE is a 4-year degree, actually. Everything else in the country is 3 years, but LSE is a 4-year degree. LSE is strictly a Bachelor of Science, a BSc, whereas if I remember correctly, UCL and King's are a BSc or a BA, so you can tailor it to however you feel suits you best. But LSE is a strict BSc, and it's 4 years long, and you have to take all 3 for 4 years. So there's these little nuances between these PPE subjects, and you really need to look into them and see, would I be happy for doing it for 4 years, or would I be happy for taking politics for all 3 years, and look into that to make sure it is in accordance with what you want. So apply to similar courses. I would recommend only applying to PPE if you're going to apply for PPE. Your teachers might tell you that you can apply to several different subjects that fall under this umbrella, and you definitely can, and I've seen successful applicants that do that. But one thing I realized when I was writing my personal statement was there's such a finite amount of space. There's one page, and you've got to convince these uni admission staff that you're worth this one place at their university and they can take you off. And to do that, I really think you have to demonstrate a passion for this degree in its entirety. Because what you fall into the trap of if you apply for similar courses, so if you apply for PPE at one uni and then philosophy at one uni and then philosophy and economics at one uni, you can't actually talk about the title of the degree. So you can't say in your personal statement, I'm really passionate about politics, philosophy and economics, and this is why, because you've got to play a very difficult balancing game where you've got to realize, okay, so I'm applying to similar courses, but not exactly the same courses at different unis. And that becomes a difficult thing to show quite specific passion for when it comes to your personal statement. I hope that makes sense. Please let me know in the Q&A after if you want any more questions about that. But yeah, ensuring a spread of requirements. UCAS is a wholesome application process. You will put things like your music qualifications, so if you did any grades, you will put any drama qualifications, you will put if you were head girl, if you were head boy, etc. Like, these things aren't just about your A-levels, they want to accept a university student that can also add value to their university student life. So if you are doing things like you're playing county level or etc. for any sports, really make sure you also enhance that on your personal statement. And it's really good, especially for PPE, because we talked about it being a well-rounded subject. So they want you to be a well-rounded individual, and that means also outside the sphere of education. Your personal statement, I think I wrote my personal statement around 50 plus times. So do not get disheartened if your first draft, your second draft, your third draft isn't right. I remember reading my personal statement at the end and then going back to my very first draft, and it was completely different. Not a single sentence was the same, but that is a good personal statement because it's gone through the process of adjustment and it's really, really taken its time to be better. I sent my personal statement to several different people saying, please, if you have any time, I'd appreciate any feedback. And that is something I'd highly recommend, because as I say, when it comes to these non-Oxford unis, the only thing they have to understand you of as a person is your personal statement. And I mean, the only thing that you can create for them, because everything else you'll just slot into a little drop-down column. Okay, grade 6 guitar, grade 2, etc. That's what you're going to do. And you're going to slot in your A-levels, they're going to slot in your A-levels equally, but that's the only kind of creative piece of work that you have a lot of control over. I'd say submit applications early. They always say that deadlines close in January and they only look at it after January, but they don't, because I personally submitted, I think, in early October, and I had university offers in November. So some people hadn't even submitted their UCAS application form, but I was getting offers. So I would genuinely suggest, even if you're not going to apply to Oxbridge, because Oxbridge's deadline was October and everyone else's deadline is January/December, I would say get it in as soon as you possibly can. And always have a backup plan. I think that goes for A-level results day as well. Make sure that the uni that you end up putting in your insurance, you'll have a firm and you'll have an insurance, is somewhere that you'd be okay with going with still, unless you took a gap year. Yeah. So the personal statement is a really tricky one for PPE. I actually really personally found this quite difficult at the very start, because there's 3 different subjects, there's 1 page, and you've got to balance your passions for all of them. Because if you say, oh, I'm so passionate about philosophy, look at everything I've ever done to show my passion in philosophy, they'll just sit there and think, well, why aren't you applying for a philosophy degree? Why would we accept you for a PPE degree? This is not the right degree for you. So it's really, really essential that you express an interest in all 3 and you try and balance it as much as possible. Now, the reason that PPE is so brilliant is because it's an interdisciplinary subject, so they cross over into each other. So one of the key things that I would suggest doing is expressing how your interests have identified that overlap. So, for example, you could talk about going to a Model United Nations conference, and that's quite political, right? You're being a political delegate, you're talking about the politics of your country, and then there is a moment that you realize, okay, I really understood that the economics of the country came into play. We're in a union with a country that is a bit less economically stable than us, and that had to be taken into account of our political discussions and our political actions. And there you've discussed how economics and politics have crossed over, and they're now interlinked. Like, you can't separate one from the other. You can't have politics and you can't have economics without the other. And that's something that they want to see, that you can identify and you understand, because that's something that's a skill that they want to enhance when you're at university studying an interdisciplinary subject. When it comes to PPE terms, I think this is where it's really essential that you cross-check your personal statement with subject specialists. So if you've got a philosophy teacher, if you've got a politics teacher, and you've got an economics teacher, make sure to run it past them. Or if you have any PPE students, like obviously you all know me now, that can go through it, definitely try. Because one of the things I tried to use a few subject specific terminology, and I had one of my teachers say, you know what, it really demonstrates that you're keen, you're trying to learn more. However, that is actually, this topic that you're discussing is a topic of wide academic research, heavily disputed academic research. So maybe you stray away from some things that they could look at, and depending on their personal view, think, actually, that's wrong. So always check it past a subject-specific mentor, is my opinion, in case you're using those PPE terms incorrectly. Eradicate any sentences that do not add value to you as an applicant. As I say, you have a very finite amount of space, and every single sentence has to be important. You need to be able to isolate each sentence and say, what is the purpose of the sentence? Does it serve one? And is it one that adds value to the previous one and the previous one? Yep, okay, then it has space. It is taking up the correct space it is. If not, it needs to go, and you need to add something that does add value. Include a variety of extra reading. I included podcasts in mine, I included lectures that I attended, and obviously books. Try and use loads of multimedia platforms, and just be interesting. That in every university, they'll give you a recommended reading guide. And in that recommended reading guide, they'll say, this is what we recommend for introduction into politics, introduction into philosophy, etc. And maybe go through them, read them. But I wouldn't recommend putting them on your personal statement, because they've heard about them. They've heard about those books enough so that they think this is a really valuable book. We are going to recommend it back to you. I would honestly recommend, this is a bit of a hack, I would honestly recommend going to the Amazon web store and searching the books that they tell you, and then scrolling down and see what other readers enjoyed based on this book, and then look at those other books, and then look at one that you maybe are interested in reading. So you can tell that clearly it's related, clearly it's somewhat linked to what they want you to read about, but it's not one that they've talked about. So you've done your individual research, and that's going to come across. And as I say, have it checked by a variety of people, subject specific. I even got it checked by my English teacher just for grammar. Just, is there any way I can make the sentence structure any better? Put it through lots of people. But the one piece of advice I'd have with that is put it through each person one at a time. So you get it from someone, then you adjust it, then you give it to another person, because you don't want too many voices and too many opinions in your head all at once, because it can get very overwhelming. Yeah, so this is generally how I'd recommend to be a competitive applicant. You have more than enough time, even if you're in year 13, you have so much time to do all of these things. Just read up on these introductory materials. So these are a few books that I would recommend. Think, what does it all mean? The Republic, The Bottom Billion. So I've read all of these, and I would recommend all of them. Some of them are on a university specification list. So as I say, maybe you don't want to include that in your personal statement. You want to search other items linked to it and then include something new so they think, wow, very proactive. So you can take a screenshot of this if you want. Enter essay competitions. Your school should know about essay competitions. If they don't, just literally search Year 13 Economics Essay Competition UK 2022. That will be one that's open. And it'll only be like 1,000, 2,000 words. And if anything, it'll really enhance your writing skills. Take up leadership positions. As I say, they want a university student that will do well in their university, but also beyond that, go on to achieve really good things. Go on to be maybe presidents of societies or making new societies at university, because university is such a multifaceted experience. So they really do look well upon the house captains, the head of netballs, the etc. So try and take those leadership positions if you can. Seek work experience, even if it's 1 or 2 days, it could be like the thing that changes your personal statement completely. So I actually wrote an email into my member of parliament. I said, when I think I was in year 11, I'm really keen year 11, I'm looking to go into politics possibly. Is there any chance I can shadow you? And they said, we can squeeze you in for 3-4 days. And I said, brilliant. And I talked about that in my personal statement about shadowing my local MP. And it's things like this, like really be proactive about it and just look for experience where you can. Yeah, juggling multiple commitments simultaneously, touched on this. It's an interdisciplinary course. You're going to have to juggle 3 subjects. So they want to see evidence of the fact that you were able to juggle previous commitments in order to apply that to the university degree going forward. When it comes to actually taking part in your PPE degree at university, these are just a few of the things that I would recommend. Obviously a bit early for you guys because some of you haven't applied to PPE yet. But yeah, just attend your office hours, your contact hours. They have really good words of wisdom to give you, because everything else is a lecture and a seminar in which you're with 20 plus people. This is the only one-on-one time you get to really pick their brains. What should I write in my essay? Engage in debate with your peers and tutors, something you can start well early into your A-level and your GCSE time. Like, pick other people's brains. It is one of the most quintessential parts of PPE. So really listen to how other people think and take that on board and think, okay, this is another view. It'll help you immensely. Read widely, join clubs and societies, again, at uni and at A-level, because that tends to transcend quite well. If you attended clubs and societies at A-levels, you will tend to do it in uni too, and the university knows that. There's going to be tons of career services in unis. Some are stronger than others, so that's another thing that you can look into in your university research. Some career services are very, very, very well packed with really successful alumni. For example, Oxford. And explore various career routes. Sometimes it's good to work backwards. If you're like, okay, this is what I want to do in the future, what have the people that I have seen be successful at this job done in their university degrees, and then work backwards from that. Network with professionals and apply to insights and internships. That comes a bit later on. Yeah, so I feel like I've been talking for so long, so I'm gonna give it a rest of it. But I hope I was able to give you guys some insight about PPE. If there's anything I haven't addressed, any other questions, please do feel free to just unmute yourself and ask away.
Hi, Harshini. This is Hemant here. Thanks very much. It's been very, very insightful. I just have a few questions. You mentioned about an exam for Oxford TSA or something like that. Is it generally given at the end of year 12 or year 13, or what's the protocol and preparations for that?
Yeah, so the TSA is not at the end of it's actually in the middle of your year 13. Yeah, I think it's in late October in year 13. And that's also, I think, very cleverly done, because it's very much in the midst of your year 13 university applications and your subject revision, etc. So you really have to juggle your existing commitments with revising for the TSA. In terms of revision, and how to prepare yourself with the TSA. As I say, it is a thinking skills assessment, and it's quite literally in the title being, it tests how you think. And obviously by that point, you're 17 years old and you've thought for a certain way for the past 17 years of your life. So it's a bit difficult to adjust yourself. So the only thing that you can do, there are a few practice papers online. There's a book, I think TSA Skills or something, where it can try and teach you how they believe an Oxford student thinks. But at the end of the day, as I say, the questions are quite abstract, and it's very much, I would never recommend anyone doesn't revise for any test. You should always revise for a test. But also at the same time, it's very much, how do you see a problem, perceive it, and digest it? And it's a more difficult thing to learn or relearn how to do that. So that's how you do it. But yeah, it's in October. You need to register your interest with your sixth form quite early on, because they need to register you for it, I believe.
Many thanks, Harshini. Thanks. Thanks.
It's okay.
I did have one more question. You know, when you have taken like PPE, and let's say your school doesn't have politics as a subject, let's say you have taken philosophy, economics, and maths, does it at any time comes as a disadvantage to any of the uni?
No, absolutely not. Like really, really no. And something that I'd really drill in is absolutely not, because I have friends who did like biology, maths, and history at A levels, and they ended up coming into PPE. This is why I say the personal statement is so important, because this is your opportunity and your entire page to demonstrate, even though I haven't taken these subjects for my A levels, which they completely agree. They understand that different schools offer different A-level subjects. That's something that they completely have in the back of their mind. They just want to know, so you haven't had the opportunity to do it in school, show us proactively how you've taken an interest outside of school then. Or maybe, I know my friend was talking about biology, and she looked into the politics of biology in pharmaceutical companies, and she realized how political the field was actually, especially in America. And she talked about American politics to do with pharmaceutical companies and how that has transcended to cause economic development in some. It's really about how you play to your strengths. So it will never be about, oh, they didn't take philosophy or politics at A levels. It will always just be about, regardless of what they've taken, how they've shown as they've got a strong interest in PPE in their personal statement and in their extracurricular activities and work experience, etc.
Many thanks. I've already asked few, so I'll probably wait for somebody else to
ask. It's okay. Any other questions? It can be about application process, about specific unis. I go to King's. You've got questions about King's.
Harshini, are you you finished your main lecture? You're taking questions now, is it right?
Yeah.
Okay then. All right. What I'll do is I'll switch off the recording now, so that the question and answer can be separate actually. So because the main lecture is what we want in the YouTube channel. People can put ask questions as well as text her in the group, so that like she can answer your questions. So the question and answer session will continue. But 1 minute, just